Our next session is going to be creativity in motorsport, and in specifically the role of an agency. And we have three very well-versed and qualified members of the motorsport community to talk us through it. So if you could please give a warm welcome to TOLIMIT's Jan Bodenaar, Hans-Bernd Kamps, the CEO of TOLIMIT, and for ROR Creative, Rory Currin. All good? You still hear me okay? I'm loud enough without usually, but we're all good. Excellent. So, gentlemen, the role of an agency within motor racing, I'm not sure many people straight off the bat are very well aware of what it is that you guys in particular will actually do. Hans, I want to turn to you first of all. What is it exactly that the brand of TOLIMIT is actually up to in the world of motorsport?
Yeah, so normally you say why they need us and why we are between the communication of teams, drivers and manufacturers and even the sponsors. There is a gap in language and a gap in communication. So at least they need something to translate some things. Yeah? So between and we are developing special ideas to activate the sponsorship for our customers from both sides. So on the one side, we are consultants of the teams. On the other side, we are consultants of the brands and of the sponsors.
So, Rory, obviously, as part of ROR Creative, I mean, you are obviously very busy these days, but I guess most people who will know the name Rory Currin will probably refer back to your time in Formula One.
Yes, that's correct. Good morning, everyone. It's been a bit of a journey, really. Starting out working for an agency with ExxonMobil and McLaren for many years, and then was the thank you very much. And then ran the creative operations at Marussia. That then was unfortunate that that stopped racing, but then started Raw Creative based on the fact that the expertise gained from the side of sponsorship, as well as from the team's perspective, we're able to help our clients in order to do that. So we have a lot of clients within F1, also with Rally, that we're able to demonstrate our expertise in order to make sure that ultimately the primary goal is for them to be noticed in order to make money through the activation of sponsorship or through how the teams are going to run that. So yeah.
And Jan, obviously working for the TOLIMIT agency, I mean, we all know as a motor racing community how important a big brand name is to an event. I mean, we look at some of the Grand Prix, and nowadays we have people like Foster's and Heineken being very much the prominent brand of a Grand Prix, for example. Just how important is it to get those brands on board in terms of, you know, the activation for a particular event?
Yeah, I think the focus is on getting brands involved. It's not about only getting the commercials at track done, getting posters done, autograph cards, whatever. It's about getting the guys on site, the fans, the customers of the companies involved in what is motorsport about, the passion, the precision, the technical aspect, these kind of, everybody is aiming for one goal of these winning sense. And when we get this transported to everybody who's there, our job is done. Then we have summed up.
I know that you guys have very recently been working on the World Endurance Championship, and obviously there's been some work as well within MotoGP. There have been some big challenges for you guys along the way to really change the ethos of these sports so that it becomes more engaging.
Yeah, at the end, the passion is the first thing we have, and the changing what we have in motorsports from E or whatever, that is there. But it doesn't change anything for us in the work of being involved in the processes in the paddock. If you see the difference between MotoGP, for example, where we're activating the brand DHL, and we brought them to the track, and not only looking if everything is nicely done and the television is seeing the brand, it is very interesting to activate the brand in the paddock and showing what's going on and what will be the future, the Motor E, for example, in the MotoGP, that we show them this is future, this everybody thinking about not only the commercial side, is thinking about the passion and everything else, and that we make expert tours. Expert tours means We are not going through the paddock and saying, here's the hospitality area, here's the manufacturers, and so on. On the other side, we show them what the expert DHL is doing. So making logistics out of the paddock and showing more quality than the customers and the guests who are there expected. And at the end, they go back and say, what else I have to do than working with them together?
Rory, you've worked with some amazing brands through your journey with ROR. I mean, obviously you've done work in the past with Ferrari and worked with ExxonMobil, as well as working with brands that are relative to motorsport and the automotive industry. You've also done work with people like Fujifilm, which is a little bit different from the world of motor racing. What are the challenges in trying to bring a brand that's not necessarily immediate within motorsport to bring them into that world?
I think the expertise that working in Formula One brings you, you're able to translate that over to other brands. So the Formula One has a huge amount of expertise and you know, that you're tapping into all the time. You can bring those towards the other, you know, not lower companies of course, but other brands that actually are able to want those expertise in order to drive their business further, because they see how successful Formula One is and how you can actually make that better for them. The biggest thing that we find as well is there's a two-stage process. In fact, there's probably three. The first one is the connection you have with the client. You know, they've already got you in the room because they actually feel that you can deliver the job already. They know your expertise, they know what you're going to do, they know what we can do. So they've already asked us to come in order to do that. The second bit is whether, you know, they feel that we actually get them. And then the third bit is that they actually know that we can get them. So once we've had that conversation and everything is able to deliver first from there, they then have that trust, and then the relationship grows and grows and grows. So they can see all of that with F1, they can see it with all the other brands, and it gives them confidence to know that actually their spend is going to be of a good value in order to generate what their interests are.
It's fascinating to hear these sort of backstories. Jan, I notice as well, obviously, one of the things that you guys do within the TOLIMIT agency, we all know, of course, about the brand Red Bull in terms of a junior program, but you guys have also had a major hand in the Deutsche Post Academy out in Germany, which is doing an incredible trade at the moment.
Yeah, so maybe Deutsche Post Speed Academy is the one of the best examples to see how we can combine a brand, a marketing activation, and motorsport itself. Because obviously it's just focused on the German junior drivers, but the drivers get knowledge of racing. They do workshops, they get technical support, they get media training, etc. But on the other hand, through Deutsche Post, they get their marketing activation. So they get an amount of money which they have to use for their next level motorsport, to step up the ladder step by step. And like Nico Hülkenberg ending up in Formula One, I think that proved that a brand is able to support motorsport on the active level, on the sportive level. And still Nico Hülkenberg, Timo Glock, etc. are combined with Deutsche Post as a brand, which is for Deutsche Post a nice thing, and for the drivers, their dream came through Deutsche Post. So this is a quite nice example to see how brand and active sport can work together as one whole thing. Yeah.
So as you can see, three very well qualified people within the world of motor racing when it comes to brand activation. I'm going to open the floor for questions in about a few minutes, well, 5 or 10 minutes time or so, if you have any. I want to turn to each of you about your views on a few things that I think are quite important in terms of the role of the agency. Firstly, Hans, why do you think it is that organizations within motorsport use these agencies for creative content? I mean, you're looking at activation campaigns. I mean, why don't they do it in-house?
Why don't they do it?
Why don't they do it within their own company? Why do they turn to people like yourself?
Because they do not have, they do not invite people who are with passion and with experience and with these knowledge around motorsport inside their company. So I have driven myself. So this is driven not only by passion, driven by the experience of being a race driver. Second, I managed to make engineering in a team, so I know the technical side of the team. Third, I have been a team boss and a team director, So I see this. Fourth, I worked for a company, for a brand who wants to be activated in motorsport. So a lot of experience, what you have and what you bring to understand all the sides of the teams, the drivers, the manufacturers, the sponsors, and so on, and the medias. So, and if you have all these experience, you know exactly what people you have to invite to the show and what things you have to do by having the results at the end. It is not only the view on. Sometimes they say, oh, we have 800 million around Le Mans. Fantastic. And who's buying? And what happened? And where's the process? What you need to sell, for example. Jan can tell you something about a process, what he did around Le Mans for the WEC, where we have someone who is only selling this nice sweets, Mentos, and it is working because we are not doing it on a sympathy way, we are doing it by knowing what the fan wants to have, and but knowing what the brands want to have, and not only appearance, that's something more, and we know it, and why we are between this, and why we have the passion for all the sides, it's working.
Can you tell us a little bit about that, Jan? Because I find that particularly interesting in terms of how you get a confectionery item into a motor racing paddock and make it work.
Yes, so obviously we have racing Egidio Perfetti, which is one of the chairmen of Perfetti Famelle, which is selling Chupa Chups, Mentos, Mints, so little fresh makers. He's doing it by his own passion. He wants to drive these Porsche RSR in WEC and 24 Hours of Le Mans, but obviously with a big brand like Mentos behind it, you have to activate it. It's a chance you have to take. And just coming from Fuji, where the crowd at the grandstands is not that big compared to Le Mans, we made sure every fan at track get their hands on Mentos. So we sampled Mentos at the pit walk, making sure everybody at pit walk got a mini Mentos in his hands, even the little kids' Chupa Chups lollies. And it's not about the sampling, it's getting the fans involved with the brand. They're taking it with to their home or eating it at the grandstand during the race. And you turn the focus to not only the motor racing, to the guy is sitting in the car and stands for Mentos. And this is the thing, or the sense behind it. It's not about sampling and getting rid of 30,000 mini Chupa Chups we sampled in Le Mans. It's about creating a story, the fan is involved.
I was going to ask the same question I asked to Hans to you, Rory, but I guess it needs to be tweaked a little bit because of late, Formula One has started doing a bit of brand activation in-house to a certain extent. They seem to have taken back a little bit of the promotion. I mean, your knowledge and your experience, I mean, has it been interesting to observe how they're doing what they're doing?
Yeah, it has been interesting. I mean, obviously they're doing a very good job with what they have. But I think, going back to your original question about why they're using our companies in order to activate their own teams, one, I think there's not as much money in motorsport anymore. So they want to see value on that. And I think added to that, there's also not many people out there who have the experience in order to generate a successful turnaround of a project in order to make sure that it delivers results. So the pool that's available in order to actually, that they can choose from, are generally maybe taken from higher teams. But those that are left for the other teams are really struggling. So that's why they're using us, for example. I mean, we work with one or two Formula One teams in order to help them activate their promotions and so forth, whether it be events or whether it be internal, whatever it happens to be. It also gives them another eye in terms of how they're doing it themselves. So we'll come in and say, or suggest ways in order to try and make it better, or we'll help them along with what they have in order to make sure that they deliver it right. It's all about a collaboration, but I think generally not a lot of money around out there at the moment. They're looking at their budgets all the time. It's all about trying to get to the top. And when you get to the top, you get more sponsorship, and that's where we come in order to try and drive that to make sure that they're able to compete with the other teams.
Now, gentlemen, I've got this theory that in years to come, they're going to look back at this era in the way that historically we've looked at things like the Bronze Age and the Iron Age. They're going to look back at this period of history as the digital age. Everything is constantly evolving, and obviously that makes your roles within motorsport significantly harder as it continues to adapt. Jan, how exactly is the driving force of what you do evolving based on the technology that comes in?
Yeah, so what we see, we had it in a panel before, is the social media aspect is growing. And the series have to decide whether they go with the technology or they stay at the level they are in the moment. So what we see is MotoGP's is, in our point of view, doing one of the best activation, speaking of technical gimmicks. So what they do with camera techniques, with high resolution slow-mos, with spreading those via social media to the big amount of fans out there watching MotoGP, is how they get involved, the fans, but how they create an interesting value for brands to participate. Yeah, when you see a Tissot fastest lap with the slow-mos of a guy riding these one qualifying fast lap, the best marketing activation you can do in our point of view in order to reach millions of fans. And I think it's about playing with these technical gimmicks we have in order to reach a bigger crowd. And MotoGP does it quite well. Formula One is, I think, on their way, just starting, and so everybody has to figure out his way.
Can you add to that, Rory?
Yeah, I think basically the thing about social media, so digital, absolutely, it has been evolving. It's changing the landscape of the creative industry. But what people are forgetting about social media is the fact there's two things about social media. It needs to be funny, or it needs to be something that's actually relevant to your own life. So that's why people like Lewis Hamilton has such a major following, because actually he's doing something outside of F1 while still winning. I mean, he's obviously a very popular figure, but you look at other teams, or you look at people who are maybe in the middle or towards the back, they're not generating as much because the story they have to tell is not as big as it could be because of certain obstacles that are up against them. But generally, if you've got a story to tell, you also make it personal, you can get there. But it has to be relevant to your target audience, and that's what it comes down to.
One of the other challenges, I guess, that must be quite relevant, Hans, is the changing demographic, the ages of the fans. Obviously, it's evolving a little bit in the way that motorsport operates, and we're having to be in this age of very, very short, sharp, a lot of people have very acute attention spans. How is that making the challenge? Is it more achievable, or is it harder when the changing demographic evolves all the time?
I think that we have to look after the people who are creating now the new way of communication. Yeah? If you see the influencer, yeah, so we have to involve influence thinking in the minds and the brains of the people we meet in the paddock. For example, we invited Rudy van Buren, that is someone who's working with McLaren together. So that is a Dutch guy who is under 30,000 people. He won the challenge to be now the driver, so sim driver in McLaren. And we invite him in to give us the understanding of this. So we are not gods, so we do not know everything, so we have to step into. He's 22. I'm a little bit older.
Yeah, no, so, surely.
So,
just to be, you're hiding it well.
Yeah, this is something what you have to understand, and what we are doing. We are sitting here. We are looking what is the changing? Is it the e-sport? Is it the Moto E? Is it the Formula E? Is this? No, this is something. We only change the technique. What is changing a lot is the way of communication, and the chance is now to involve other groups of people, younger people who are in the moment not fans of motorsport, but can be fans of stories and fans of brands or fans of products or whatever. If you see the influencer in other areas, yeah, like young young girls are doing now with cosmetics or something like this. This is working so incredible, yeah? And we are not able to do this? Sure, we can do it. We only have to create it, and we just started creating something for the boys' toys, yeah, to say we're going a little bit more in the area of motorsport, and we see that it is not only a boy area, it is an area of understanding. And this chance, with a new kind of communication, is very good to use it. And we have to do, and we are just in the middle.
I want to ask the same question to you, Rory, because there was a big stink in Formula One a couple of years ago when I think Bernie made a comment when somebody asked the same question to him, and he said, well, I'm interested in the Rolex wearers who are obviously bringing money into the sport, which is one way of going about it, but obviously the need is obviously to pass on to the next generation, otherwise we won't have that generation in the future. How important is the changing demographic?
Well, I'm sure it was the same when we were younger. You know, that people above us had to appeal towards us. You know, I mean, when I got into Formula One because I used to love watching Ayrton Senna. I'm sure a lot of you did as well. And like you're saying about becoming a brand ambassador, I think that's something we try and drive with our customers, with our clients, is trying to make, you know, when I used to watch Senna winning, you know, getting on the podium, the first time I was able to buy a Hugo Boss t-shirt, do you know what I mean? From a child, seeing the logo on Senna.
Very
and all
stylish as a kid.
yeah. But do you know what I mean? It's you from that age, if you're able to plant the seed in that younger generation that then has a continual growth over time. I mean, I still buy Hugo Boss, but and I'm not trying to promote them, by the way, but I'm just trying to use them as an example.
Are available.
but what I'm trying to say is doing that is key to them having the next generation come through, whether it's an interest in Formula One, interest in a brand, whatever it happens to be. But you have to understand it a little bit like Castamara. I don't know if you've ever remember Castamara. And I mean, he took this young kid who was just a yob and turned him into the heavyweight champion of the world in Mike Tyson, the youngest ever. But it's because he understood how he could make Mike Tyson a heavyweight, what he was going to do in order to instill those principles into him. And then, of course, when he became heavyweight champion, that was just the key figure. So I think it's that whole growth. It's also moving direction, because I'm sure there were times when Mike didn't want to do training. It's trying to work with brands. What do you want to do? What's the demographic looking like? Okay, it's changed. I mean, look at 10 years ago, we only starting with Facebook. Now it's become so prolific. You know, what's going to happen in 10 years' time?
I'm aware that we have a couple of minutes left, but I'm also very aware that there might be a couple of questions from the floor that people might have. If anybody does, this is a good moment. If not, then I do have another question which hopefully won't open too much of a can of worms, but I do want to delve into it a little bit, because I think the brand activation element of it, we have seen a major evolutionary change, Jan, in the last sort of 10 to 15 years or so, and that's from tobacco advertising being completely expunged from motorsport on a worldwide scale, and now we're all almost starting to talk about alcohol going the same way. So looking at the way that, I think, Rory, you touched on the fact that the money just isn't there in motor racing like it used to be, and I think a lot of that is down to how much money used to come from tobacco revenue, and I don't think people appreciate just where that money has disappeared. So this is a hard question to ask on a stage at Silverstone, but what's the answer, Jan? Is there a straight answer?
So speaking of tobacco, we've got two good examples just in the past to tell this. Is once the activation Porsche did at Le Mans, these Rothmans Porsche, where there was not a Rothmans brand on it, it was just the color combination and this kind of livery, and everybody immediately knows this is the Rothmans Porsche. They Googled it, I'm sure they Googled it, and you come to the old pictures, and immediately you have an involvement of Rothmans in these kind of motorsport, in this big Le Mans crowd, without telling anybody this is a Rothmans Porsche, because you're not allowed to, obviously. And the second thing is, I think Ferrari is doing it now with Mission Winning Now, or Mission Win Now, I'm not sure.
Which they did in Austin, so that worked.
So this is...
Obviously worked.
It worked well, yeah.
Yeah, same story. Yeah, so to not telling everybody that this is Marlboro, but it is Marlboro. And I think this is the only way you can use these tobacco things. And speaking of alcohol, it's the story everybody is telling: don't drink and drive. 0.0 products, which are almost in every product line of the big brands. So you have to see if this is working. I know that Heineken is not 100% happy, or they didn't. They weren't at the first year, but now it's getting better and better and better. And the activation in Mexico, when we see these big thing with Armin van Buuren after the podium ceremony, where Heineken brand was just a sponsor of the Paddock Club and immediately stepped into these young crowd celebrating Armin van Buuren and these big event in Mexico. I think this is the only way they can interact with motorsport in the moment.
Do you have anything to add to that, gentlemen? Obviously, times have changed in the last sort of 10 years or so. Is it going in a good direction from what you can see?
Just picking up on that very quickly, cigarette branding is obviously finished. Now you see the rise in energy drinks branding. There's, things are always changing. So as a result, I think the wider question is, where's the money going to come from? Because I'm sure in years to come there'll be something to say about alcohol, obviously with energy drinks and everything else, because you're seeing very limited advertising for alcohol. So, but they obviously have a lot of money to spend. Energy drinks obviously have a lot of money to spend, but obviously with that comes some health risks in some cases. There's, where does the next pot of money come? So there's a wider question for the growth of the sport that we all love, in order to make sure that actually, what is the message we're trying to do, rather than just trying to find the money. If we have sustainable activation that continually drives the sport or drives sports in general, then I think there we have something. But I think we're still trying to find it.
I'm very aware we're just drawing to a close, and I don't want to overrun too much, but I have one suggestion, Hans, just to wrap up, which I guess is definitely showing massive growth, which is the esports sector. How big a difference do you think that's going to make over the next 5 years or so?
Yeah, we have to understand. So I have been in some events of the Formula E, making guest programs and making programs for our partners and sponsors. And what I have to understand is that the new generation, it can be that they are not there because of the noise. Yeah, so this is something else. So I'm coming from the V8 engine, 7 liters. Yeah, you understand? Wow, this is fantastic. I like this noise and so on. Yeah, so when Formula One started to get with a new noise, everybody was shouting, no, it's not good. Not everybody. There were only the old ones, yeah, who said this. And they had the influence now to say it. When the young kids will have the influence to show us that racing is something without noise, and that you have your DJ on your ears, and someone is between saying the yellow car is in front now, or whatever, yeah? Then it is a video game on the track. Yeah, so there's a combination out of e-sport and real sport and so on. And I watched a lot the e-sport things what around the MotoGP is in the moment. They have the challenges in the paddock in the moment. So they very clever combine the real racing with the e-sport. Yeah, so this is, the changing is there, and we can't do, and we will not do anything against it. We will be involved in this. We want to be part of it, and from my opinion, it is a good show. Let's do it.
The great thing about esports, Jan, is that you and I are still young enough to be world champions at something.
Very
we can
good.
still tap into it.
Aiming for that, yeah.
Rory, are you finding it to be an exciting element of the sport now, esports?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's very interesting. But where does it go? Where's the crossover? With the reality. I mean, I'd love to have that. If you were in the esports, I think you'd actually be able to feel the G-forces, be able to feel the pressures and everything else that's associated with that. Then I think, because with movement, you react in a different way. Actual proper movement of a car. So I think that might be the next level in terms of where it goes. But I think, yeah, it could be it's very impressive to see where it's going already.
The tragedy of this session is I could literally go on about this for another hour or so. I find it doubly fascinating. But if you do have any questions or anything you want to talk about with our three guests, I'm sure they'll be able to stick around for a little bit longer to answer any questions you have. Thank you very much, Hans-Bernd Kamps, Jan Bodenbach, and Rory Currin. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.